Hello and welcome to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed. And first of all, thank you to all the subscribers out there. Thank you to all the viewers out there as we continue to grow and try to bring you great programming on every show. And speaking of great programming, how about Jim Lampley, who was on with us recently, talking about memories of his great friend, the late, great George Foreman, but talking about how he got his career started coming out of the University of North Carolina in 1971, how he got started in boxing, some of the memories of the greatest fights he's covered. And it looks like that Jim Lampley is going to be coming back to blow-by-blow boxing again, working with Turki Alalshikh and with the Saudi royal family and the Saudi sports fund backing him. And it's fantastic to see that we don't have to really deal with the old school promoters anymore. And we don't have to really deal with the networks refusing to cross the street and do business with each other. As, Alalshikh came forward and said, I'm going to fix broken boxing when he got started. And boxing was broken, and so far, so good. We're getting the fights that we want to see, and hopefully the politics are gone from boxing for good. Now, I know that's a tall order, and I know maybe that's not realistic, but so far, he's putting fights together. He's paying the fighters. He's not dealing with the old school promoters. He's not dealing with the old school networks. He's dealing with the DAZN pay-per-view, and we are getting the fights that we want to see. But, Jim was so good, and we kind of ran out of time because he's a busy man. He had places to be and people to see. But I love the fact that he's back in boxing. I love the fact that he's doing the commentary here. And I love the fact that he picked his top 5 heavyweights of all time. With George Foreman being in the top 5, he had Joe Louis first, Muhammad Ali second, George Foreman in the top 5. And I said, that's fantastic. So let's give my top 5 heavyweights of all time. Number 1, Jack Johnson. And the reason I picked Jack Johnson is I don't think there's ever been a heavyweight champion who was so far ahead and so much better than the rest of the competition at any time in history. There was nobody with a chance to beat Jack Johnson when he was heavyweight champion between 1908 and 1915. And based on what he had to go through, Jackie Robinson in 1947, absolutely, he went through a living hell. He went through prejudice. He went through name-calling. Being the first black player in Major League Baseball, it was a difficult road. But Jack Johnson went through far worse in 1908. Every time he stepped out the door, he was in danger of being murdered. Every time he stepped out the door, he was in danger of being lynched. So I think Jack Johnson, based on what he went through, and based on the fact that it was 1908, as bad as it was in 1947, it was light years better than it was in 1908, America at that time. A black man being heavyweight champion of the world and marrying white women? I mean, Muhammad Ali used to say, I'm bad, but that boy was crazy. Jack Johnson, he was the baddest man of all time. So I get him number 1. I have the greatest, Muhammad Ali, at number 2. And obviously, you can make a tremendous case for him being number 1, with winning the heavyweight championship in 1964, winning it again in 1974, and putting together one of the great careers in boxing. Number 3, the Eastern assassin Larry Holmes, I think is the most underrated heavyweight champion of all time. A piston-like jab, good combination punching, good straight right hand, good chin, good stamina. And how about the chin when he ran into one from Ernie Shavers in 1979? I think that in itself right there showed how tough and resilient and what a good chin Larry Holmes had. So I've got him at number 3. And as we mentioned with Jim Lampley, I've got George Foreman at number 4. Big George Foreman. In my opinion, the single greatest accomplishment in the history of sports was George Foreman regaining the heavyweight championship at 45 after he'd won it 22 years earlier and after he'd taken a 10-year break from boxing. Just unbelievable to accomplish that. Number 5, Sonny Liston. You might be surprised with this one. Damn, Sonny Liston, after he tanked the second Muhammad Ali fight, he might have tanked the first one? Yes, because I think between 1955 and 1959, Sonny Liston was probably the greatest heavyweight of all time. Go back and watch Liston against Cleveland Williams, the first fight. One of the great heavyweight fights in history. Do yourself a favor, go to YouTube and watch that fight. Sonny Liston in the late 50s, in my opinion, might have been the greatest heavyweight of all time. So it's Jack Johnson, Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes, George Foreman, Sonny Liston. You're saying, well, Dave, wait a minute. Where's Joe Louis? Where's Rocky Marciano? Where's Jack Dempsey? Where are some of the great fighters of all time? Well, my list is based on whom would beat whom. And I don't think Joe Louis or Rocky Marciano or Jack Dempsey could beat anybody on my top 5 list. I base it matched on who I think would win the fight, not on longevity or career achievements, of course. So that's my top 5 list. And also, when you get to Jack Johnson and the Jackie Robinson comparisons, I think every boxing arena in the world, everywhere where they stage fights, should have a pair of gloves and a plaque up there, and maybe a pair of old school boxing trunks hanging in honor of Jack Johnson. Much like baseball has retired Jackie Robinson's jersey, Jackie Robinson's number in every ballpark in the major leagues. I think we should do the same for Jack Johnson, because he did what Jackie Robinson did and more, and went through more difficult times 40 years earlier. So I think that's to be done wherever they hold boxing. And getting back to Jim Lampley here, working with Turki Alalshikh, Jim gets a lot of criticism. Live Golf gets a lot of criticism. Everybody in sports gets criticism for going to Saudi Arabia and working with Turki Alalshikh and holding sporting events there because of the quote-unquote sports washing and their human rights record, their miserable human rights record. I can think of a country that has a worse record of human rights violations, a country that has murdered millions of people in the last 50 years, a country that right now is running slave labor concentration camps where they're committing genocide against people of color. Yes, that is China. Yes, that is the CCP. What about the NBA and sports washing? Why doesn't anybody ever talk about that? Why doesn't anybody ever talk about what hypocrites LeBron James and Adam Silver and the NBA owners and the networks and Greg Popovich and especially Steve Kerr, what hypocrites they are? See, when you look at Kerr and Popovich and Adam Silver in the NBA, they're Greg Popovich, they're never at a loss for words, are they? In criticizing President Trump or criticizing policy or talking about foreign affairs like they're some kind of expert. But when the subject of China comes up, boy, they clam up, don't they? And you know why? Because they're all making millions of dollars. They stuff their pockets with blood money from the communist Chinese. And they don't criticize China because they put profit over human rights. They put profit over doing the right thing. So the next time you hear people talking about sports washing and Turki Alalshikh and, boy, why would boxing do business with him with Saudi Arabia's miserable human rights record and their record of persecution against women? Okay, that may very well be true. But what about the communist Chinese? What about the CCP? What about the National Basketball Association doing business with China? Jim was talking about Turki Alalshikh and how much he likes him and how good he's been for boxing, which is true. We have, at this moment, there are people of color in northwest China that are living in slave labor camps, that are manufacturing products for the NBA, shoes, shirts, hats, a portion of which goes to Steve Kerr, goes to Greg Popovich, goes to the NBA owners, goes to the networks, goes to the players' salaries. And not only slave labor camps, but you read about the gang rapes of the Uyghur women who are in those camps nightly by the Chinese Communist Party soldiers. The genocide, it is literally, this is the worst genocide since World War II in Nazi Germany against the Jews, going on right now in northwest China. Not a peep of protest from the media. Not one word of protest from the NBA media, of course, because they're all in on it, because they're all making money off of this. Not a word of protest from LeBron James, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, Adam Silver, NBA owners, networks. Remember, Mark Cuban was on with Megyn Kelly not too long ago, and she pressed him on the issue, why would you ever do business? This is when he still owned the Mavericks. Why would you ever still do business with the Communist Chinese Party? They're committing genocide as we speak. Will you speak out against genocide? Will you condemn the Communist Chinese Party? And Mark Cuban said, well, I condemn all human rights violations, not just China. I condemn all of it. She said, no. Megyn Kelly said, no, Mark. Specifically, will you condemn China for committing genocide? He said, hey, I'm not going to fall into that trap, Megyn. This is what you want me to say. All I'm going to say is I'm against all genocide, not just China. And then Megyn said, Why is this so difficult, Mark? What fallback is going to happen to you? What is so hard about saying, I, Mark Cuban, am against the genocide of the Uyghur people of color in China, and we shouldn't be doing business with China? What is so hard about saying that? And he wouldn't do it. He dug his heels in the sand, and he wouldn't do it. Remember when Steve Kerr, he was actually asked about that. He went on another, I think, anti-Trump rant one time and about human rights violations. And somebody asked him, well, what about the Communist Chinese Party, whom you fill your pockets with blood money, Steve Kerr? Well, you got anything to say about that, about the genocide going on in Northwest China? And his answer was, well, I'm just a basketball coach. That's above my pay grade. I'm not really up to speed on all that. Yes, sure. He's up to speed on everything else. He never shuts his mouth, claiming to be a human rights champion and a social justice warrior with every other subject in the world. But when it comes to, taking blood money based off the back of genocide and slave labor, all of a sudden he's got nothing to say. And he also actually said, well, my brother is a college professor. I'll have to ask him about it. He knows a lot more about it than I do. What an insufferable hypocrite. And the other night, remember, after a game, he came out with a T-shirt that had Harvard University on the front. And they asked him, well, Steve, why are you wearing that? Well, it's because of Donald Trump, imposing his will on Harvard and trying to affect education and cutting off money, public money going to Harvard and cutting off their income tax status. Yeah, but Steve, it's because of their anti-Semitism, because Jewish students aren't being allowed to walk to class, because the protests on campus are chanting death to Israel and genocide to Israel and kill all Jews. Nothing to say about that. Again, he's got an opinion about Harvard. He's got an opinion about Donald Trump cutting off money to universities that practice anti-Semitism. He's got an opinion about everything, doesn't he? But when he was asked specifically about the Communist Chinese Party committing genocide against the Uyghur people of color and how he personally profits from it because they manufacture hats and T-shirts and shoes and NBA gear and equipment in those slave labor camps where women are raped, gang raped at night, where genocide occurs, hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs have been killed, where they're forced to work 20-hour days, not getting paid and making product for the NBA. You don't have anything to say about that, Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, LeBron James, Adam Silver, National Basketball Association. You want to talk about sports washing? Yeah, you want to talk about sports washing with Saudi Arabia and Turki Alalshikh? How about the National Basketball Association and their shameful way they do business with China? Adam Silver should have gotten in front of a microphone years ago and said, I know it's going to cost us money. I know we make a couple of $1 billion from China, but we're not going to do business with them anymore as a matter of principle. They're murdering people of color. They're committing genocide. They're running slave labor camps. And we, in good conscience, cannot keep making money off of this. Has he ever said that? Nope. LeBron? Pop? Look, I'm going to knock on a door here. Are you there? Anybody home? LeBron, Pop, Steve Kerr, Adam Silver, National Basketball Association, NBA media? Yeah, Steve Kerr. Well, I'm just a basketball coach. You're asking me questions about public policy. I don't know that stuff. I'm just a basketball coach. This is above my pay grade. He's really not up on the subject of the slaughter and genocide and slave labor of Uyghur people in Northwest China. He's up on everything else. He never shuts his mouth about anything else. But on that subject, that's above my pay grade. I don't think I'm qualified to speak about that. Again, profit over justice. These social justice warriors and these human rights champions in the National Basketball Association and elsewhere, they're for social justice until it costs them a dime. If it costs them a dime out of their pocket, whoa, I don't know anything about that. Popovich, well, I got nothing to say about that. I'm not up on the subject, Steve Kerr. I'll have to ask my brother. LeBron's never pressed on it. Has a reporter ever pressed LeBron in a locker room after a game about how can you in good conscience talk about social justice in America, human rights violations in America, talk about President Trump, and never mention that you make millions of dollars from the Communist Chinese Party who's committing genocide against people of color? Has anybody ever asked him that? Well, no, because the NBA media are cowards. Most of the media are cowards. And that's why I went on this rant here, because we were just speaking with Jim Lampley, our great guest here on Dave Smith Unleashed, about Turki Alalshikh. And everybody, well, he live golf and the new boxing promotions going on there in Saudi Arabia. That's sports washing. They're trying to clean their image of horrendous human rights violations by getting into the sports. Well, like I said, China's human rights violations are far worse. Is there a genocide going on right now in Saudi Arabia? Have there been 1 million people of color slaughtered over there in a genocide, forced into slave labor camps in Saudi Arabia? I don't think so. What's going on in China is far worse, and we don't hear a peep out of these insufferable hypocrites associated with the National Basketball Association. Oh, thanks to our great sponsor here, MTS Transportation, 800-640-6873, 800-640-6873. Reliable, on-time delivery, compliance you can count on, round-the-clock support, superior communication, experienced logistic partners, and mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off on your next shipment. So for all your trucking, all your freight, all your shipping needs, there's only one place to call. It's MTS Transportation at 800-640-6873, our great sponsor. Okay, that just about wraps it up here. But again, thank you to all the subscribers. Thank you to all the listeners. Thanks to everybody who's made this first week of Dave Smith Unleashed so great. Go to youtube.com/@the-Dave-Smith-Unleashed podcast. That's how you get to the show. youtube.com/@the-Dave-Smith-Unleashed podcast. And there you go. Make sure you spread the word. Get all your friends to listen too, because we want to build a lot of momentum with this podcast, because we're giving you things, we're giving you topics, we're giving you takes, we're giving you guests and things that you don't hear anywhere else. So thanks again to the great Jim Lampley for taking the time to doing this, and we will talk to you again. Oh, and by the way, if you want to find out about the schedule and when the shows are going to be on, go to X, go to @DaveSportsGod, DaveSportsGod, @DaveSportsGod. I'm always posting updates. I'm always talking about when the next show is going to be, who the guests are going to be, what the topics are going to be. So go to @DaveSportsGod. Thanks again to MTS Transportation. Thanks to the great Jim Lampley for doing a tremendous interview with us. And we'll talk to you next time right here on Dave Smith Unleashed.